welcome to this video, which is about the Opus 10 number 2 Chopin Etude, which is both notorious and one of the most difficult etudes in our classical piano repertoire. We will take a look at how to practice it, how to avoid getting tense, some fingerings, some tips and tricks, and also some thoughts on how to approach this very difficult piece. First, let's take a look at what this piece is. It's an etude of a classic ABA form, like most etudes, which means we have a repeating A section, and that is how the piece also concludes. So we have A, which is this, and then we have, and then again it goes back to the A minor. So basically a very simple form. Also, it's quite simple in terms of musicality and structure, because the right hand has the 16th notes, which go almost, with just a very small exception where there's a small rest in bar 32 and so on. Apart from this, basically it runs through the whole time, making it a perpetual movement in the 16th notes of the right hand, and the left hand has the role of rhythmical stability and supports also with harmony. So in the left hand we mostly have chords and the bass, which sets the foundation for the harmony. So pretty easy setup if you think about it from a musical perspective. There isn't a lot of there aren't many complicated elements involved. Also, we stay in the same time signature the whole time. We don't change anything dramatically, and the dynamics are also quite linear with crescendo, decrescendo, crescendo, decrescendo, and so on. So it's quite linear in this perspective, also not terribly complex to analyze and understand. It's very famous, performed quite often, and has a rating of a very hard etude. So difficulty talk and rating lists are not subject, but I will just very briefly touch up on this because I think it's important to understand that this is in fact one of the hardest etudes, and I don't want to start a discussion now on what is harder or what is easier. I will just say this etude is definitely in the top 3 Chopin etudes, maybe even the top 2, and as a classical repertoire I would also say that this etude is one of the hardest ones that exist out there. Of course there are other contenders, but this is still, you know, even though it's just 1 minute and something and it's just 4 pages, it's such a hard etude that often you will hear people choose other etudes in competitions and so on, because if you do not go in with a warm hand and on a good day, I think we've all seen what can happen with this etude, and yeah, it's just risky. It's a risky choice. It's also important to a little bit respect this difficulty, because if you do not have multiple Chopin etudes under your belt, let's say at least 5 other etudes, I would not recommend you jump into 10-2. Of course you can do so, it's a free country, right? You can choose how you want, but you might have a real risk of doing a wrong technique or injuring yourself, which would be terrible. And this piece is one of those pieces that should come with a big warning triangle for tendonitis. We work the outer fingers, especially 4 and 5, so much in this etude, and they have to be played so fast that there's a real risk that you develop tendonitis because of the interconnected tendons that these fingers share are so overworked, especially if you cramp and you play it with a tense hand. You have a real risk of developing tendonitis with a stressed position and so on. It's quite easy to develop tendonitis in this piece. This is another reason why I recommend only experienced pianists on a decent level to tackle this etude. If you have a couple of years under your belt, then go for it. If you know that you're a beginner, you can try it for fun, I guess, because who can stop you anyways? But it will probably not be a good result. And as I said, real risk of injury with this etude more than others Although technically with every etude, if you have really improper technique, you can injure yourself. Okay, so that was the disclaimer and the boring part. Now let's get to the fun part. I thought, first of all, I want to address certain fingering choices that exist. And I want to say that your personal preference in the end should be down to you. Don't let anyone, in the comments dictate what fingering you choose and what fingering you don't choose. It's your own personal choice. There are several ways to shortcut and to bypass things in this etude. I will have to say most of these are not recommended to do, because first you bypass the sense of the etude, the logic, and also what it should practice. You want to practice the outer fingers, and you want to get that coordination and so on working. So bypassing many of these is not recommended. The second is there are parts where it's generally safe and considered musically justifiable to do so. I will also show you this in a minute. And there are parts where I think pretty much everyone does it because it makes little to no sense to not do them. You can follow Chopin's original fingering, which he wrote almost for 800 notes, I believe. So he wrote a fingering on almost every note depending on your edition, of course, but you can find the finger almost everywhere, and you can either follow that or you can substitute certain fingers. For example, fourth finger for fifth finger. I will also show you this in a moment, and sometimes 3 for 4, but that's less common, but there are some parts. Last statement I will do about this is knowing is always better than not knowing. So I will show you these things. I will show you that they exist because they do exist out there. I will not tell if you should do them or should not do them. And if anyone says that doing these things bypasses or doesn't help you with anything because you're cheating yourself, there might be some truth in that, but no one should decide for you what fingering you choose. So with that being said, again disclaimer, I don't recommend this, but I will tell you regardless. Okay, so the first thing is this is safe stuff, this is normal stuff, this is just normal choice. Some people, so this going up, this is quite normal. Some people prefer to place the fifth finger here where there's a fourth finger. The reason for that is that the 3-5 connection is one that feels a bit more stable for most people. So you might see in some recordings people do this. So instead of going 3-4, 3-4-3, they go 3-5-3. I've even seen recordings and some people who play both 4 and 5. Okay, now there's a whole kind of concept. You can play this whole etude theoretically using 2 fingers on places where there should be just one. Do I recommend it? No, but I see a sense in it, because placing 2 fingers on there is kind of, you need less energy because the 2 fingers will do the work easier than one. Okay, now of course you need an extra movement to do it, and you probably have to switch your whole fingering. So I don't recommend it, but again, knowing is better than not knowing, and just so you know, this option exists. Then let's get to a bigger offender, so to say. No, this is not offensive at all, it's just this exists. As I said, I will stop talking about this. Anyways, you can technically cut the chords here, always the fourth one. As you can see, normally, right, this is to be played all in the right hand, because the right hand always has the figure of 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, and in the top there is the chromatic line. But in this case, you have the possibility to split the last one in the left hand. What does it gain? what's the gain for you is that you can use a fingering like 1, 3 something, and you momentarily are able to rest your 4th and 5th finger. This is the point, yeah. So you can something like this, or 1, 3, 5, 4, something like this. Yeah, 1, 3, 5, 4. This is not some gimmick that comes from some dodgy class. No, this is actually taught at a very professional level and was taught for many years. So there you will find people of this pianist and pedagogue and piano school doing it pretty much everywhere. Do I do it? No, I don't do it, but just so you know that it exists out there and you can do it. Of course, it's much easier because you get a little bit of rest going, and in this etude, really every single rest is important. I will tell you only one thing where it might be useful to do this, is that let's say you're doing a run through of all the etudes, or let's say you're in a situation where your hand is terribly cold but you have to play this etude, for example during a run through or doing your performance exam, competition, whatever. Let's say you have done your stuff and you still have this Chopin etude, and or this is the first piece, yeah, and your hand is cold. Just knowing that this exists might save you from complete embarrassment one time or another. For example, let's say you play and you notice really the hand doesn't work, something like this, right? Then you might, the second time around, you might switch it up and can recover from that. As I said, knowing is better than not knowing. Also, in this case, it applies. For emergency, to have a backup kind of solution, yeah, is sometimes what can get you out of misery. The next thing is in bar 4, and this is one that I personally use because it's one of the musically justifiable things to do. Right here, this is the way to originally play it. But what you can do, I like to emphasize the middle voice here. So what I do is I take this in the left hand. This is actually done on a high level too, yeah. So just the control you can do with the thumb is a little bit easier to do with the left hand, and therefore you can emphasize and musically justify to take this part in the left hand. Bar 18 offers a chance for you to change the fingering from 5, 5, 4, 5, 4 and so on. You can actually just go 3, 2, 1 and then 4, 3, 4 if you like this, or you just use a normal scale fingering for chromatic and then you jump. So you have these two options. Of course, you can just also use the original fingering if you like, but this is, for example, one part in the same symmetry with bar 35, 2, 1, 2, 3. So you can actually use a kind of, you know, chromatic fingering here instead of going 3, 4, 3, 4. Again, does it defeat the point? To an extent, but it's good to know that this option exists. But this is one option where you can choose the chromatic fingering. One very cheeky and very out there thing you can do in bar 19 is you can actually take the chords, you know, as long as you can reach them, I guess, yeah. You can take them in the left hand, and therefore you can change the fingering in the right hand, and that is pretty much it. It does repeat in an ABA form, and you do what works best for you. First, you need to try to use original fingering. That is the most recommended, and that's the point of the etude. That's how we should practice, right? With a lot of 5/4, 5/4, which I will get to now. The feeling in your hand when you're playing this etude is for me one of the most important factors, apart from the fingering. So what does it feel like to play this etude? If you put a lot of effort into each note, it becomes quite tiring after some time. Not only are you putting a lot of stress on your hand and tendons, but it's pretty much guaranteed for you to tense up. Start from the minimum that you have to apply in pressure in order for the sound still to activate. So you start by playing it only on the keys and not pushing them down fully, so like this. As you see, this is bare minimum, and then you add a little bit more with the arm, yeah, you add a little bit of arm weight and try to go as little as you can, but the sound still comes, yeah. So something like this, yeah. You don't need to play it mezzo forte or forte. Anyways, it's piano for the whole for most of the etudes. So this would be too much, you know. Like right this, like this, you put too much emphasis on each note, and then you're wasting a lot of energy. I use something like a static kind of pressure a little bit from my arm, which feels a bit like this, yeah. And I try to have my wrist higher than usual. So normally my wrist is quite low like this, I play mostly. But for this etude, it's recommended that you have the wrist a bit higher and a little bit of static pressure pushing down, yeah? So it feels like you have, you know, this kind of weight that gets you going, and this is responsible for the notes, you know, for the fingers putting the keys down, like this. So the finger has to do less work this way if you have a bit of this static pressure. Actually, the finger is just dragging along like this, and I do the movement from here, from the arm, a little bit down and to the side. The first and second finger are the accompanying figure, right? So very important that they're not loud and not played too actively. If you play them quite actively, that's one way that people don't even know that they're tiring out their hand, is that the 1 and 2 are so active and so much movement that of course the whole hand suffers from it. I mean, everything connected, right? And if you play the 1, 2 in a very active way, you're wasting also here energy. As little energy consumption as you can. Put the hand, especially the wrist, sideways. This will help you, because playing it with a straight hand to the keys is actually harder to get to the next position. So you want your third finger especially to always be on the lookout for the next note like this, right? This is the feeling that you will have with the hand going up. So if your hand is like this, you might have a lot of gaps in the legato, which of course the legato is important. He writes sempre legato. So you want a bit of sideways, and therefore your hand and your fingers will be better placed to go up. When you go down, you will reverse this a little bit, yeah? So not like 180 degrees, yeah? But slightly more neutral position, and then when you go back up and like this, yeah? That's also a trick for thirds and other things like that, is that we want to look a bit in the direction that we're going in. When you play this etude, you might be of the case that you play one page, that's fine, second page starts to get tense, third page impossible to play, and then that's it. Why does this happen? It means you're doing something that is still tensing up your hand. For example, very popular is fifth finger tension, or 1 and 2 too active, or the whole hand is articulating too much, too actively, you know? If you play like this, this is like a Czerny exercise. Of course, sooner or later, it will tire you out because you're way too active. That's why you need to find out, why am I wasting energy? Why am I getting tense? There has to be something that you're doing in your hands which just is using too much energy. And the other thing I would like to say is that the even better way to do things is with the concept which I've explained already, which is about active relaxation, which is that even in a situation where you're tense, and you best try this by trying it out yourself. Let's say you play the etude, page 2 on the bottom, you're tense, yeah? If you can in that moment manage to lose tension while not stopping to play, by actively creating a mind-muscle connection and just relaxing your hand as much as possible, you will be amazed. The first time it works, you will be amazed, like, I managed to relax because my hand was getting tense and tense and tense, but I managed to let go. This will be quite an important experience to do. Tension is a natural thing that occurs when we play the piano, right? Because there are many things that make tense and consume energy and make muscles contract and so on. But the ability to let go of that and to relax even in a state where you continue to play is also a key for this etude. Another tip I can give you if you're struggling with stamina and you're struggling to play the whole etude is that you make a gap when you feel like this is so tense I can't play anymore. You make a rest and then you continue, and you try to shorten that rest after each kind of session. So you might need a full minute of rest, I don't know, or 2 minutes of rest the first time before you feel like I can continue, you know. And if you shorten this amount of time, you will get to a point where it's very minimal, and you can even use, and you do like this, and already you're fresh, This is the point you need to get at this etude, that you can play it so effortlessly that you don't have to stop in the middle because you're so tense. That's why I say that's why everyone agrees that this etude is so hard. It's not only about 4/5, it's also about, of course, evenness. Yeah, the notes have to be more or less even in rhythm, not in dynamic, however, because there is crescendo and decrescendo going on. So technically, one note will be a bit louder than the other, and so on. And you also phrase things when you go up and when you go down, but they have to be rhythmically even. You can't play like this. Yeah, it has to be quite metronomical from start to finish. Exception for that would be small parts like something like this. You can justify it musically to take a rubato. Exercises are great. My personal favorite is this one. So like this, you can do the whole etude, yeah, even like this, you can do everything like this. This is my personal favorite. Some people also like this one, and this is quite famous pattern. I would recommend to anyone who wants to do exercises for this etude, check out the Cortot edition, because Cortot always came up with interesting exercises. I've seen exercises, for example, for Opus 25 number 6, and not all of them will work for you. Some of them you might think like, oh, what's this? I don't get it at all. But he has very interesting exercises in his edition. So Cortot edition exercises, there will be more than I can show you. But what I think is very useful is this one. The other one is this, and so on. And the other one is to just practice the chromatic line of the right hand. And so on. As you can hear here, it's not quite even. The reason you want to do this for a while is because you really want to get the legato. Note by note, that there's no gap between. This is probably what you need to do first, and then you need to add the rest. Yeah. So first you need, from start to finish, have this right hand chromatic line down. As you can see, it will you can play the whole piece like this because 1 and 2 are independent of this. Yeah, so the line on the top will always work independently of 1 and 2. Once you have the whole etude together and working at a certain pace, it's about metronome practice and slowly increasing that metronome. So you first start with a very reasonable tempo. Remember to use as little energy as you can, have the right hand position, and don't over articulate and so on. Some people might recommend to over articulate in practice. Personally, I like to keep things similar in practice and in performance, but if it works for you, you can over articulate in practice so you have more movement and then later on less. I would recommend that you start slow and slowly increase the tempo with a metronome app, whatever. For example, you do a run through, or you specifically target the A section and the B section and A again, and you try to increase that tempo over time. Results will take weeks. This is one of the hardest etudes in our classical repertoire. Don't expect to have immediate results or immediate gains with this etude. It does take a lot of time, and progress will come, but first you need to get the foundations down. You need to get the outer fingers in the right position with the right mindset, not being tense, and a lot of practice and some exercises. So that's it for this video. If you have questions for this etude, feel free to leave a comment below. I didn't cover everything today, of course, but I tried to cover the most important aspects. But if you have a question, please leave it below and I'll check it out. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and give a like and leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next video.